Hello, and thank you for joining me for this look at the wolf and lynx population in Spain. A bit of a look at the conservation story, some up-to-date figures, and a few tips on where to go in Spain and how to see these magnificent creatures. In this most bizarre of years, I'm sorry we can't be at the Birdfair this year, but we're doing our bit to bring you some hopefully nice images and some interesting stories remotely. So let's get underway. We're of course in the Iberian Peninsula, and I'll be focusing here on Andalusia down in the south of Spain here. The two strongholds of the lynx are in Donana National Park here, just to the south of Sevilla, and also up in the hills to the northeast of Seville, up in the Sierra de Andujar. So that's where we'll be focusing the talk. And then when we move on to the wolf population, we'll be up here in Montaña Palentina. First of all, let's take a look at some of the population dynamics. You can see here that the territory of the Iberian lynx has shrunk markedly from the 1960s on the left there to 2016, where those kind of aquamarine colours of shading show a distinctly reduced territory of breeding individuals. And in fact, in the early 2000s, the lynx were seriously fighting for their very survival. And here you can see a bit more blown up the territories in 2003, when the lynx were really fighting for survival, down to the last few viable breeding individuals here in the Sierra de Andujar and Donana. And you can see actually a more positive story. In the last few years, the populations have bounced back somewhat, and the orange gold colour shading there shows the breeding territories more recently in 2016. So in the last 15 years there has been some marked improvements, and this is due to sterling conservation efforts through some very talented and dedicated individuals. This is the population in Andalusia on the left from 2002 to 2018. And in the rest of the Spanish Peninsula, Iberian Peninsula, on the right. So there again, you can see a generally positive trend as time goes on. I think it's worthwhile reflecting on this chap, top left, Guy Mountfort, who mounted 3 famous ornithological expeditions to Donana back in the 1950s. And Guy Mountfort, went on to find the WWF in 1961. And this book on the right is well worth getting a copy of. It's not expensive in second-hand bookshops or online. And these series of expeditions occurred at a time when British naturalists were not really venturing too much overseas, certainly not on birdwatching holidays. So for those of us now working in the bird tour and wildlife travel industry, it's interesting to think back just 50, 60 years ago to the days before package travel, and the days when these guys used to set off for places like the Donana on the shores of the Mediterranean, and they filmed things today that we take for granted for the first time. Things like great spotted cuckoos nesting and Spanish imperial eagle vultures in the nest. This book's well worthwhile getting a copy of. Today, Donana and the gateway town of El Rocío looks like this. Here's the edge of the Parque Nacional, the flooded marismas or marshes in front of the town of El Rocío. It's a bizarre place to stay, sandy streets. It's almost like the set of a Wild Western. This is the hotel we stay at, the Hotel Toruño. I wonder if you can tell what those large wooden stands are outside the hotel. Well, those are so the local horsemen and women can have a cold beer in the evening without dismounting. Quite an ingenious little development there. And like I say, it's like the setting of a Wild Western. Sandy streets, more horses than cars. Around the town, you find very commonly nests of white storks. Notice here the Spanish sparrows making nests in the substructure of these enormous nests. And the view out from the hotel, to be honest, this photo doesn't really do it justice, because these rice paddies and marshes are thronged with breeding birds in the spring, arguably at its best in April and May, but actually the lynx watching is at its best in the winter months. In the spring, species like curlew sandpiper in its breeding plumage, and Eurasian spoonbills. We head out on our lynx watching holiday at dawn in four-wheel drive Jeeps and Land Rovers, and we'll stop and try to find the footprints of lynx. The guides take great delight in pointing these out to us. And on a red letter day, we might just come across a magnificent feline like this Iberian Lynx here, who will show off and create some wonderful memories for us with shutters clicking away at a furious pace. A magnificent animal. As I say, these days the lynx have rebounded somewhat due to sterling conservation efforts. There's a captive breeding centre nearby the national park, where they have tended to try to get some genetic diversity going by bringing males down from the Sierra de Andujar and breeding them with females from Donana. You can see some of the successes here. It really is a wonderful species to see. At the captive breeding centre, they will hand raise the lynx before releasing them off into semi-enclosed pens. Once they're a viable age and are kitted out to survive themselves, they will be relocated into the national parks, either in Donana or the regional nature reserve up in Andujar. Just before they're released, the scientists and the vets will give the lynx a thorough once-over, just to make sure they're nice and healthy and in good shape. We're not allowed access to these captive breeding centres for obvious reasons. We don't want to be bringing in any infectious diseases, and that seems particularly poignant to this moment in time. And when they are released, they're generally radio collared, so the scientists can keep a good watch over the lynx and check their travelling distances and dispersal rates. Unfortunately, a number of lynx each year are killed on the Spanish road, so one measure the local government has made is to create these subterranean tunnels so lynx can get across the other side of these busy arteries, these busy roads which circle the national park. Quite magnificent cat. Some of the threats to the lynx, well, roadkill I've mentioned, territories. Donana particularly is surrounded by a noose of major roads and rice paddies and huge greenhouses, strawberry plantations. And it really is a battle. Arguably the biggest threat are the rabbit populations, because lynx feed almost exclusively on rabbits, and in years when the rabbit populations are hit by myxomatosis, the lynx can starve. So a large part of the conservation effort surrounds the captive breeding of rabbits and the release of these rabbits into areas known to be habituated by the lynx, and this helps them in those years when otherwise, without intervention, the rabbit populations would crash and leave the lynx particularly vulnerable. Here's the lie of the land up north, the other side of Sevilla, in the Andujar area. Rather than going around in safari vehicles here, we tend to be situated at a panoramic viewpoint, and we'll carefully scan with binoculars and telescopes to try and see movement in the undergrowth. Signs all around reminding us to modify our speed. This is the zone of the Iberian lynx. And the sites here would include red deers. We're scanning for the lynx. There's a lot of other wildlife to keep us entertained. And we might just be lucky enough to see last year's cubs walking along the stony areas, the boulders at the base of the river, just near a reservoir, a very well-known lynx hotspot. 9 times out of 10, when you see movement in the undergrowth, it turns out to be a raven or a wild boar or a red deer, but your heart really does thump when you do realise you're seeing one of the world's rarest cats. So to enjoy all this, have a look at our Realm of the Iberian Lynx holiday. It's a 5-night holiday which operates from September to March each year. It's a lovely part of Spain, wonderful hospitality, food and wine, and some wonderful wildlife. Even if we're not lucky enough to actually see the lynx itself, we are on the majority of our holidays, but it can't be guaranteed. With eagle owls and Spanish imperial eagle, and with all the other delights, it's a great part of Spain to be. So that's Andalusia and the lynx population for now. Let's head north. The stronghold of the Iberian wolf population in Spain tends to have been in Zamora, just over the border from northwestern Portugal here. Bit of a similar story really with the wolf. The population has dramatically decreased over the years, Wolves, to a much greater extent than lynx, have been persecuted, poisoned, much maligned, blamed for things that it really has nothing to do with, particularly as far as the raising of livestock is concerned. But in more recent years, as Spain's migration has largely decamped to the towns and cities in Spain looking for employment, animals like wolves and bears have, especially in northern Spain, benefited from the depopulation of the Iberian Peninsula, and wolves are now doing better than they have for many decades. Here's a population of the wolf in Europe, with strongholds in the Apennines in Italy, the Baltic states, northeastern Europe, and here's the stronghold of the Spanish subspecies, the Iberian wolf, down here in the Iberian Peninsula. It's kind of more orangey and rustic than the grey wolf, slightly smaller and more slender. This photo wasn't a wild wolf. This is taken in a rehabilitation centre in Portugal, but it's just nice to give you a close-up so you can see the physical characteristics. The way that we go about seeing wolves in Spain is by taking over these 3 lovely terraced farmhouse cottages in the Palencia mountains. It's a bit of a house party type tour, this, with our wonderful hosts, Tino and Rosa. Inside is wood-burning stoves. Rosa does all of our cooking for us and stocks the 3 kitchens up with breakfast supplies, so we make our own breakfast and head out each day with our telescopes and picnics to scan from panoramic viewpoints in these largely empty but nevertheless stunning mountains. Here's a typical view. The tapestry of the landscape here is kind of part New Forest, part Northumberland. Here's Tino, our lovely guide and the host. So it's a question of wrapping up warm, particularly in the winter months, and scanning these various areas of heather and plantations for movements of the Iberian wolf. As we're scanning, once again, we're looking for red deer and lots of other types of wildlife. There are vast tracts of beech forest here, which is a stronghold of all 5 species of European woodpeckers, especially the black. Wild boar are common and will certainly keep us entertained. And at certain times of the year, the wildcats, resident wildcats, are very active, chasing rodents, trying to fatten up before the harsh winter season. So it's a really good place to come and see wildcats as well as wolves and the occasional bear. And a typical sightseeing would be a fair distance. It's certainly not really a photographic tour, this one. Any records, shots, just that really for the record. You won't be selling and mounting these shots, but because the wolves are so scared of humans, they've built up a very healthy fear of humans over many decades of persecution. So a view like this, about half a mile away, would be fairly typical. But just on red letter days, we might just be lucky enough to come across a large alpha male just in the valley below where we're scanning. And he would check us out just as we're checking him out. But what a magnificent beast. So that just gives you a bit of an insight into how we go about watching these magnificent animals in Spain. At the time of writing, Spain has just opened up for tourism again. And us as a tour operator, we can't wait to be running some of these tours in the back half of 2020. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you're keeping well and not missing the Birdfair too much. We certainly will very much hoping to be back, all being well, in 2021. Thank you very much indeed. And that's all from me for now.